What is going on, guys? Happy Wednesday. Today we have on Ken from Hydrospace. How you doing, Ken?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So you've had a pretty cool product out for quite a while. In the last while, I've heard a ton about it. I haven't personally tried it, but I have some sitting in my shopping cart for next time I do an order, so I'm going to soon. But a bunch of people are saying I should have you on, so it all worked out. So happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday.
So I guess, do you want to fill us in a bit on, Hydrospace and what you came up with and kind of the different kind of bacterias and, how it affects reefing?
Sure. Well, I mean, first, I'm not a microbiologist. I'm an ecologist by training, University of Oregon, go Ducks. And, but I'm a lifelong aquarium hobbyist. So I've been keeping aquariums, I guess in October, it'll be 40 years.
Nice.
Been without at least one tank around somewhere. So that is kind of my first and foremost thing. And I kind of got into the microbiological side tangentially by getting into the live feed thing. So my studies in college, especially like my postgraduate work in aquarium science program, centered around live microfeeds. And that was kind of my career path, post-college, hatcheries, labs, things like that. And and at one point, I actually found these bacteria researching something. We were looking for something to do with to feed copepods and simultaneously bioremete the culture water. Mm-hmm. And looking into them, I found that they did more and more stuff, that they had so many uses, so much utility that I just got really excited about them. Up until that point, I've kind of, especially as an aquarist, I've been a jack of all trades, including like even straddling into like the pond world and stuff like that. So, and horticulture. So I've kind of bounced around a lot, and this is the one thing that really grabbed me, and that I really focused on, probably because it itself has so many different facets, which we can get into in a bit. But I won't. Yeah. So the last job I worked, day job, was Algae Barn. That's where I was researching these bacteria. And so I'm still here in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And we started Hydrospace in 2019.
Nice.
So things have been changing a lot and still are. So it's been great.
That's awesome. Aqua Killer, Hydrospace for the win. There's a lot of people that are a big fan of this stuff. By the way, thank you for the super chat, Aqua Killer. So there's a ton of people that are a huge fan of this stuff. Like, I'm kind of excited to try it myself. But, I had Chris Meckley on a few weeks ago, and he was just raving about it. And, tons of people are always like throwing it out there on the internet. So is it more, a lot of people are saying it's great for nutrients, great for feeding our corals. So with the specific strains, like what led you to the specific strains, and like what do you see as the biggest benefits from
them? Well, what led me to the strains I have was availability.
Yeah.
That's what led me to start a business. It wasn't, I had no initial intention of starting a business around these bacteria. In fact, it was meant to be kind of an in-house secret at the aquaculture facility I worked at. But I found it so difficult to source them from anywhere that I was like, well, maybe this is something we need in the hobby.
Yeah.
They're widely available for fish farmers, especially in Asia. But here at like the hobby level, getting like a small amount especially is really difficult. I had someone today from Italy write me to ask for a 100 milliliter size. He's like, yeah, I want the deep cycle, but man, 16 ounces is like too much. I'm like, I don't know, dude. I could do for you there. Like the bottle is going to cost, more than the product at a certain
no kidding.
Anyway, to scale it down, and actually the agricultural grade stuff isn't really suitable for aquariums, especially reef aquariums. Tends to have leftover nutrients and things in it like that obviously wouldn't be good for these types of systems. And if you think the stuff that's available in the aquarium market smells bad, go ahead and try some of that.
It's the lightweight version.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how, where we did looking around in the strains. And I think you might mean species,
Yeah,
but
sorry.
yeah, that's okay. People interchange them a lot, but it does actually matter. I think it'll matter more as we start to pick certain strains because we'll fine tune this in the future. This whole microbial thing isn't going away in aquarium keeping. It's only going to expand and get more fine tuned, and we'll see a greater interest in strains at that point. Right now, Rhodopseudomonas palustris is the big one. I'm not sure if it's necessarily the ideal species, but it's kind of like one of those things where everybody talks about it and everyone uses it. So everyone studies it. So everyone talks about it and everyone uses it, and so on. So, that's what I was able to get a hold of first. Isolate. There were three, well, actually, not counting our marine product, we've isolated three strains. And then eventually I replaced the Rhodopseudomonas with a known strain, which is TIE1.
Okay.
For anyone who's really interested in deep diving, TIE1 is one of the most studied strains of Rhodopseudomonas palustris, and we now have we have the license for exclusive commercial license for that strain.
That's cool.
Yeah. So the other two are Rhodospirillum and Rhodobacter.
So when you're isolating it, are you literally like under a microscope, like pulling out just the ones you want and culturing it, or is there some way that you like separate it out over time? Or
yeah, no, I mean there's going to be hundreds of billions or trillions of cells in a. I don't have enough Adderall for that, but no. So it's a matter of using selective media. Some things can tolerate oxygen. Some things need it. You can go back and forth like that. When you're being really aggressive, you can use antibiotics. And there's some, if you do streaking, things like that, you can do some physical, but most of it is, just cultivating. It's called minimal media, and it basically provides them. It doesn't give them a smorgasbord. It gives them only what they need just to survive. And the idea is that other things won't be able to survive.
Okay.
So you keep it. Yeah. So prior to this last acquisition of TI1, all the strains we use in ProBio were freshwater, though they are in origin, though they are euryhaline. So they just as easily live in saltwater.
Do they reproduce in saltwater, or do they just survive in saltwater? I've always been curious with some of the ones that are more freshwater origins.
It may be species specific, and in the wild they have all kinds of pressures, natural pressures, competition, and abiotic pressures. So they may not survive even if they could technically, because they get wiped out. They're just not as competitive, but some definitely do. You see more of the freshwater ones adapting to saltwater than vice versa.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now the one that we got, TIE1, that's the one that we sourced from a lab.
Is that the ProBio? Is that that one is?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the three that are listed. There are actually four PNSB in ProBio. In fact, Rhodoplanes is a much more unknown PNSB, but it's really similar to Rhodopseudomonas.
Okay.
So I actually don't even list it. I consider it a little bonus.
Special edition.
Yeah.
The Johnny 220. Do corals actually eat this stuff? Does this directly feed your corals, or does it feed other stuff that, then provides that bacteria indirectly to the corals? Or
excellent to point that out. Both. So corals do eat a lot of bacteria. They're selective though, and they focus on certain types of bacteria, especially diazotrophs, which are nitrogen fixers. When we say eat, sometimes they directly consume them, but in other times they'll incorporate them into their mucus and tissues, somewhat like they do zooxanthellae, and utilize them. So Rhodopseudomonas palustris definitely is consumed by corals.
Okay.
And there are even papers showing where there's a seasonal bias, and low in seasons where nitrogen availability is particularly low, they will more selectively graze on Rhodopseudomonas.
Mm.
Yeah, and the thing, so they're especially nutritious. So to start, I guess, our interest at Algae Barn at that time, we were really looking for something that was high in carotenoids, which most bacteria don't even have at all. These photosynthetic, and they are photosynthetic bacteria, by the way. These guys are rich in like lycopene, which is what makes tomatoes red, astaxanthin, a
So
common.
that's all for fish coloration mainly, right?
Well, it
Yeah.
travels up the food chain. So imagine, so my mandarin eats probio, yeah, in a way, because if
The pods
you're,
eat it, then they eat the pods.
yeah, or even, protists, or, protists eat the bacteria, and then the pods eat the protists, and yeah, up the food chain like that. And those carotenoids are transferred up the food chain that way.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So yeah, over 50% protein, more digestible than algae, rich in B vitamins, especially cobalamin. Their only Achilles heel is probably there's certain essential fatty acids. So we recommend pairing PNSB with phytoplankton, especially the ones that are rich in the essential fatties.
Yeah. Okay. Carlos, I've been using Deep Cycle. This is the way, reefers. So I guess, do you want to explain the difference? Like, Deep Cycle kind of sounds in its name for cycling, but do you want to kind of, I guess, go over the difference of the benefits of each bacteria over the other? Because I know, you got the yellow snow, you got the Deep Cycle, and the probio.
Mm-hmm.
So what, is it more advantageous to use them all, mix it up, or is it, kind of, is Deep Cycle only for cycling, or is there benefits to using that ongoing in a system?
Ongoing, because your cycles are ongoing, and sometimes you lose certain types of bacteria or just don't have enough to like fully support. It's not like there's one species that does manages all of your phosphorus cycling, for example. So it rounds out the ecosystem. I would start out with probio. People refer to it as the red bottle often. This is our original product, kind of, because it had the Rhodopseudomonas in it.
Okay, that's the name I recognize the most. So yeah, I'm assuming that's probably the oldest one, or the main one.
Yeah, this is the one that's been out for 6-7 years. More or less unchanged until earlier this year. We obviously changed the packaging. It looks a little different, if you're familiar with the old bottle as well. And but yeah, and then we added the other two species, Rhodospirillum rubrum and Rhodobacter spheroides. Why? Because even though they're similar, they complement each other nutritionally, and they're vastly different, like in shape and size.
Yep.
So because probio is meant to be a food, by the way, primarily. So what we wanted to do there is have a variety of particle sizes, so to speak, so that any kind of bacterial planktivore can more efficiently graze them, just based on what it normally feeds on.
Yeah.
So those are the species. Actually, I'd refer to them as the big three often. They're the ones that are most widely used in the commercial aquaculture world. So
for someone watching this that doesn't know what this is or doesn't fully know, so I guess if you're considering it food, it's essentially like, at the planked bacteria level, like the base food of the ocean in a sense. So it's feeding all the stuff up the chain in your system.
Yeah, again, really good way of putting it. So put it like, so for example, they're really popular in shrimperies, Pacific white shrimp, and especially Pacific white shrimp, because it also is a probiotic in the true sense that it fights disease. In that particular case, it's really valuable because it fights Vibrio, which is really destructive in that industry. But yeah, the idea there is that they put it in the water, they put it in the food, they put it everywhere. But the idea is that the shrimp, especially the larval shrimp, consume it and conveys those nutritional and probiotic benefits to the animal directly. but then those benefits are paired with the bioremediation.
Mhm.
So the animal digests more of the food it eats as a result of having those that added to the gut flora. And so it increases feed conversion, as they say. As a result of the animal digesting more food, obviously the hatchery manager saves money on feed.
Yeah,
But then the other benefit is that the animal craps less.
that's fair.
So down the line,
Water's cleaner. The animal's
exactly.
healthier. So,
Yes, exactly. So it's a win-win. You could actually end up with cleaner water the more you feed, right? And these are highly intensive fisheries, so
mhm.
they something like this is so valuable to them. I kind of laugh. I said, people, and I get it. I do it. I own a business. I have to do cost benefit things all the time. But
Yeah.
when I see like the paltry amount we spend on these things, especially in Asia, where like the bottom line,
Mhm.
it's like this stuff is widely used, and that can only be because it's tried and true, and they know damn well it's going to increase their yield to an extent that it will broaden their profit margin.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at it from like even as a hobbyist, you're probably in many cases going to save money on water changes, so salt and RO water, and
Mhm.
it's an insanely nutrient. It's probably about as good as a live planktonic food can get
Nice.
nutritionally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I've heard
then
lots of
yeah,
people say it's like improved their lower their nutrients in their tanks as well, which is always a plus. So,
yeah, and especially like in Chris Meckley's case, he probably talked a lot about that on your show, but that was in an NPS system
where you just shove
where
them in food.
yeah, yeah. So water quality management could, potentially get really, really costly in a situation like that. But here now you're pairing that one task, feeding, with water
Mhm.
quality management. So there you go. It's
Speaking to
and
Chris, he's in the chat. He said no more GFO.
nice.
There you go. Balances out the cost. Okay, a couple chat
So
questions before I
yeah.
forget about them. When dosing Hydrospace Deep Cycle or Protobile to cycle my tank using the fishless method, should I leave the lights off since they said they're photosynthetic bacteria?
Yeah, they're not obligate phototrophs, meaning they're not like a plant. They won't die in the dark. Um, they'll survive in the dark in aerobic conditions, just like kind of your regular bacteria. But preferably for them and for you, they
Mhm.
would live in an anaerobic environment because that's where they can do all the good stuff, all
Yeah.
the extra good stuff like denitrification. Two of the three species in ProBio, the Rotopseudomonas and the Rotospirillum,
Mhm.
are capable of denitrification, for example. And they can only strangely enough, they can only photosynthesize in an anaerobic environment.
Okay. Oh, that's
Yeah.
weird. Good to know.
Mhm. Yeah. So as long as you have some biomedia, like a porous kind of biomedium,
Mhm.
or sand bed,
Yeah.
and minimal. We're not talking but you think of a deep sand bed where you need you know, 4 inches or something. Like an inch of sand on the bottom is sufficient.
Yeah. Okay.
Plenty of them will live there, do
Nice.
their good stuff.
Okay. The Johnny T20. Do you know what is the maximum percentage of energy that can be uh, deprived from the red bottle for corals in a tank?
Energy?
I don't know how you'd figure that out. How much of it
Hmm.
converts? I mean, that would probably depend on the corals and their uptake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty cool question. You're coming at it from like uh, uh, aquacultural technician if that's what you do. So yeah, I don't know. There are papers out there. I forget what it's FAO, what that stands for. Yeah, but anyway, all the guidelines have been laid out for these guys, using them in shellfish hatcheries, finfish
Mhm.
hatcheries, and so you can go get like to the strain in some cases. All the fatty acid content, protein content, all that stuff.
Yep.
So
Perfect.
um,
Now, from like the reefer standpoint, does it make a difference if you dump a bunch in at once? You do it weekly, you do it daily on a doser. Does that have any big different effects? On a system?
people talk, it's I have yet to test it on a doser.
Yeah.
I have people ask about that all the time, and it's one of those things I'd like to do, but I've only got so much time. I'm usually running around breathlessly to catch a good show like this, and run, from just about enough to finish, the day-to-day stuff. So that's just one of the things I haven't done, and the reason is you can't overdose these guys. That's one of the best things, as opposed to many of the chemical methods we would use to remove pollutants, by the way. Or if you overfeed a dead food, like reefroids or whatever, not to pick on anybody or use a loaded word like dead food, but those things pollute the water, is my point. And you can't it's pretty hard to overdose a bioremediator.
Yeah. The worst that happens is probably just going out the skimmer and you're wasting it. I don't think it'd ever do any harm. So
here's kind of a fun example to address like the odor. So the new ProBio just has a different weird kind of bad smell. These anaerobic bacteria in general and PNSB in particular are not known for having a pleasant aroma. That's to be expected when you use these. But it does just gas off as soon as, especially the sulfides are exposed to oxygen. They're just neutralized, or they gas off, blow away, whatever. It's kind of a short-term thing, but a gentleman he got a bottle of ProBio and it smelled really bad, and he was like, I don't think this is good. It smells like, he's like, and wisely, if you're not sure, wisely, he sent it back, but contacted him. He's really cool about it. And in fact, I just sent him a bottle myself yesterday, even though the store he bought it from replaced it. I'm like, oh, no, let me send you some Deep Cycle. That was actually ProBio. But I'm not going to get a flood of complaints. Looking for free. But anyway, so I got this bottle in the mail from him because I asked him for him to send it back. I always like to test things, and even if it's just subjectively, like to open it up, give it a smell, and which I did, and it smelled normal. So it was the same normal, predictable, good, awful smell. And to the point of overdosing. So like when I was done with it, I'm like, all right, what am I going to do this? I had a 40-gallon, and he had hardly used any of it, but a bottle treats 400 gallons. And I was like, well, this will do. I just poured the whole thing in the 40-gallon, and I was actually kind of curious to see how long the water would be pigmented. But yeah, and it's like the fish were fine. And so no, these are primarily anaerobic bacteria. If there's light, they're generally going to swim, and they're also motile. They swim. So they swim away from oxygen, but they're only going to go as far away as they need to go before they start losing access to light. So they will naturally go to a place that is most suitable for them in any kind of environment, including an aquarium. So that's presumably what happens. You overdose that, and they're just, whatever doesn't get grazed by corals and clams and tube worms and so forth are just going to colonize the aquarium, and their next tribulation then is competing with the microbial community in your aquarium.
Okay. So
another story.
Another question, chat. Does no smell mean it's dead? So if it doesn't smell funky, can it crash and die off, or?
Well, so that's the other thing too. That's the weird irony here. Sometimes people will get a bottle, and this is my favorite complaint. It's the best complaint. Like, hey, it doesn't smell bad. Is this okay?
Yep.
Yeah. What I'll say, and I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine. Generally what happens is, so in our bottling process, we circulate it to keep everything homogenized, just to keep good consistency. And towards the bottom, there's a little bit of splashing, and it's been in there longer and has more time to degas. So I think what happens is a lot of just from that alone, just a couple hours of, bottling, a lot of those sulfides just kind of gas off and disappear. And you might get a bottle that doesn't smell really bad if you're lucky.
So it all works out. Yep.
Those should cost more, but they don't.
It's the bonus bottles. A few people are like, don't dose when your wife's around. I'm just like, yep, they'll be the doser at like 3 a.m. No one will notice. Okay, Than from Tidal Gardens. Can you compare, contrast it with Bacillus? Bacillus, hopefully I'm saying that right. Bacillus.
Oh, Bacillus.
Bacillus. Yeah, I didn't think I was pronouncing it right. Yes, that's what we're currently using. So I guess for him, how does it compare?
Uh, well, nutritionally, I mean, Bacillus isn't even in their world. I mean, they don't even have the carotenoids. These guys are just, much better as a food. For bioremediation, Bacillus is a contender, actually. It can be pretty good at denitrification.
Mm.
So I mentioned the other species that we don't even list, Rhodoplanes, actually genus. We've never been able to resolve the species of this one, much less strain, but Rhodoplanes is a complete denitrifier. So that one is actually pretty good, but compared to like Rhodopseudomonas, Bacillus may actually be a more effective denitrifier if you're trying to get rid of nitrate, for example. So kind of mix and match. An argument Mr. Salem Clemens of Reef Builders makes often is that Bacillus is not a commonly or abundantly occurring microbe on in typical coral reef environments. So I don't know if that necessarily makes it a bad thing, because it also, Bacillus also, like these bacteria, have some utility as a gut probiotic. So even for a fish in a reef aquarium, even if they're not really endemic to a reef naturally, Bacillus, could still be used in that way, fed directly to the fish, for example. But just tit for tat, honestly, I think even though these are more expensive to produce than Bacillus, and actually not as easy to store and transport, because Bacillus they're sporiform. So in many cases, they're either a dried powder or they're in a dormant state.
Yeah.
I think it's the little bit of extra cost for PNSB is well worth it, especially if you're looking at the nutritional benefits. And I don't know why you wouldn't.
There you go,
anyway.
Dan. Just have to try it.
Hey, Dan.
So if it's on a doser, does it need to be shaken or stirred? Acrokiller is kind of mentioning about using a magnetic stir with it. Will it settle out or be an issue if it's not fully homogenized when you're dosing it?
Yeah, you definitely, it would, a lot of it would just settle at the bottom. And then my other concern would be what is growing in your lines, like,
bonus PNS.
I mean, that's one of my most hated things working, in the labs and with phytoplankton. I was always having to check and clean the lines, every time you checked them, they needed to be cleaned. So. Yep. So check, and I hated it. So I'm like, if these can't, that's the fact that they can't be overdosed is actually kind of a nice bonus. So, but I suppose a constant supply of it, would be great when you're using it as a food, but you just have to be very careful of those things. Okay. Yeah. You obviously have to stir it and also be very mindful of allowing contamination in the lines. Yeah.
Okay, so Richard Combo, can you have a breakdown of the cost based on system size? So I guess this is coming down to more the dosage, because it says, a bottle treats this. Is that per day, per month, per like how do you define like the treatment versus duration in a sense?
So both products, we recommend a dosage that's based on their average density. Both products, the dosage is about 1.25 mil per gallon. Admittedly, that's pretty arbitrary because that's going to depend on a lot of things, right? Yeah. What are you using it for, first of all? Secondly, what kind of results are you wanting to achieve? And then thirdly, which is probably why most people ask, how much do I have to spend on this? Yeah. Or rather, more appropriate, how much do I have to spend on this compared to some alternative? So the 1.25 mil per gallon is like our usual max daily dose. Again, somewhat arbitrarily, that's the point where we figure you're going to start getting diminishing returns. unless you have a very densely stocked aquarium where there a lot of corals like grazing on it.
Yeah.
So one bottle treats 400 gallons. That means one dose.
So
one,
like one day, boom, done.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why we've always dealt with this with people with very, very large systems. Going back to why we did this in the first place was to serve the aquarium community, not just to have a better quality product, but sell it in small amounts.
Yeah.
I get the guys who contact me from other continents wanting me to ship them a 1 milliliter bottle. Okay. Yeah. But then at the same time, I have these people that are like, they do have legitimately large systems, or they, after using it a while, they rely on it more and more as a food.
Yeah.
And it's not so much the amount of dosing, but it's the regularity of it. I think that could get expensive. Again, I think when you run cost benefit analyses on this, it's like, well, yes, but then the cost in time and money to remove the pollutants from other foods. People with an established display tank, they may not want a lot of coral growth. Not a big deal there, and particularly if they have awesome water quality. But how many of us are in this world of like 200-gallon tanks full of frags this big and in nitrates at like 80 parts, and so anyway, a lot of people are going to be using a lot of this, and that's why we've come up with some solutions to make it more cost effective for them. By making it more cost effective for us, packaging is really expensive. So more recently, we came out with a 1 gallon size.
Nice.
Yeah, 10-pound dumbbell here.
Perfect.
Dual use. These things, PNSB, are so versatile. So anyway,
get your workout on the way to the tank in the morning.
Right? Yeah. Get your morning workout. So yeah, that's 1 gallon. I can't even remember how much that treats. It's a lot. We'll put it that way. It treats do I say on here? No. So it treats a lot. I forget now. It's on the website, but I mean, you just multiply it out, or I can't see it right now, but the big one is the one that treats the most. That treats 16,000 gallons. That's we don't sell those through stores. That's the only, like, if people come to me, like a farmer or something like that. Yeah. So that you would basically buy it in the cube, which is what we actually cultivate it in. It's a 5-gallon cubitainer, like a collapsible polyethylene clear thing. So yeah, you can get like 5 gallons of it, and I do occasionally sell those to some coral farmers. And Chris Meckley gets 2 of them now a month, and some others. But yeah, there was some. We wanted something in between, for a little more hobbyist level that has like UPC on it, for example, that can be branded, like where stores can sell them. So that's what the 1 gallon is for. It's basically like, so it's like 8 bottles. So 3,200 gallons it treats.
Okay. That's a good chunk. So if you could be dosing a good chunk of that daily then to justify that one. Yeah.
And we even have something in between this and the large cube. So the PNS Homegrown kit. Okay.
That's a culture to home? Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that one is really cost effective, in fact, because a lot of the expense, especially nowadays, is just shipping. Yeah. And you got to understand, like, some of these products like get moved. There's a distributor, and they might even sell to a wholesaler who sells to, there may be 2 hands between the distributor and the store before it reaches the customer. I mean, that's a lot of FedEx, so.
Okay. So fill me in on the Homegrown now, because I'm curious. Is it like a one-time thing, or is it kind of an ongoing culture? How does this work out?
No, it's not a continuous culture. It is it's a one-time deal. It basically get everything you need to make enough to treat 8,000 gallons. Okay. But then the downside is that you have to do the work yourself. You need a few common household items like bleach and stuff like that. Okay. And then you got to, you wait 30 days on a light. But then yeah, you get
That's
8,000
fun.
gallons, and you have a perfectly fresh batch, and you have it on tap, and it comes with a spigot on the
Just walk. If you have multiple
on the
tanks,
cube.
just walk around, psh, 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 drop things.
Yeah, so that's 2.5 gallons. So it's this like the same kind of cube, but it's smaller. So it's
Okay.
a little bit more manageable for people. And that too has the 3 species in it that ProBio has. It's essentially you're making ProBio at
Yeah.
home.
Huh. That's pretty cool. I'm tempted to try that. Who sells those, or where do you find those ones?
Oh, geez. I mean, saltwaterquarium.com, LG Barn.
Okay.
I think BRS has it now.
I think I only
Premium
saw the bottles
Aquatics.
there. Maybe they have it though.
Yeah, Reef Legends is always a great place to buy stuff like that, and also phytoplankton. So I know they carry it, the
Nice.
kits. Yeah.
Okay, so there's lots of good solutions out there for big tanks too.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
if you dose a small amount, will you still get enough benefits? Like my initial gut thing was like, hey, I'm going to buy a bottle and put it on a doser. It says it treats 400 gallons. My tank's 200 gallons, and I just do that over a month. Like, would there still be enough of a benefit from doing like the smaller daily doses on top of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you at least have the benefit of the one meal, like every meal
Yeah.
keeps us alive. But the idea, yeah, it's there's a there's a point of diminishing returns, but then there's also a point where you're adding so little, how much is it going to do?
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking more is about where it lives in the tank, right? And continues to reproduce inside the aquarium.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, well, with that, what basically you would actually need, generally, we recommend larger doses for that.
Mhm.
Because to seed a material, particularly if it isn't sterile, there are already bacteria on it that they may or may not be able to outcompete.
Okay.
So usually if you wash them with a lot of bacterias, you not only you're playing the numbers game there
Yeah.
in terms of those competitive interactions, but then these bacteria can also release antibiotics like streptomycin, kanamycin that they create what's called a zone of inhibition
Yeah.
on that part they colonize. And but they only do that. They talk to each other. This is just a weird fun factoid. It's called quorum sensing, and they send chemicals to each other. They talk to each other. So they
That's cool.
basically sometimes they're like, is there enough of us to make it worth releasing antibiotics? Because if they're just out alone, they're not going to waste their energy to synthesize and then release this compound, because it'll just get diluted in the environment and not hurt anything. But if there's a lot of them, enough to make enough to actually inhibit other bacteria, they hit that threshold, then they'll start producing the antibiotics. And that's the point. That's why you add a lot. You flood the biomedium with these bacteria, and they just have a better chance of successfully colonizing it.
So you're actually better off doing a larger dose less frequently than smaller, more frequent doses, in theory.
Yeah. So for seeding, as we call it, or inoculation, immobilizing them onto a biomedium, you would do a pulse dose, which is a overdose.
Yeah.
Usually that's less defined, because basically you just want to add enough to submerge the biomedium in whatever material you're soaking it in, and then just keep it anaerobic, preferably with some light. Give it a few hours. For feeding, then that's obviously a different story. You might even put it on a doser, but you could certainly add it every day. Here's a really good point to make too. I don't think I make it enough. Certainly not in our literature. The best way to add these bacteria really is in the food. Just in terms of like husbandry, it's like when you're going to be pulling all this other stuff out anyway, you're thawing out foods, you might even be chopping stuff up, and because it has the probiotic qualities. So these bacteria, Rhodopseudomonas in particular, occur naturally in the fish gut. They're a natural part of the fish, at least in the wild, gut flora. So if you add it to their food, the fish actually have that benefit. Now, without, what do they call those things to make food sticky? The stuff you mix it with. Yeah, right. To make it stick.
Agents, whatever they're called. Yeah.
Without that, especially, I don't know how well these actually stick to the food. So, some of it's going to be leaky and get out into the tank anyway and become immediately available to.
Same thing as dosing it. So.
Exactly. So why not just put it in the fish food, soak it for another, you just give it a couple minutes or whatever, and then the fish get, there are proven benefits in fish as well. This is pretty widely studied, Rhodocytomonas in particular, not just the where it increases growth performance in food fish, but it's shown to inhibit different fish diseases. So, good stuff. Well, you might as well just add it to the fish food, and then it goes through their poop. And
no, that's actually a good way to do it, especially if you're feeding them manually anyways. Just dumps them in, mix it.
yeah, they poop less, and then the fecal pellet already has these
Nutritious for the next crab, whatever eats it.
that or these heterotrophic bacteria that are embedded in the pellet that'll break it down right away. So
nice.
And then thirdly, for anybody especially anybody raising fish or anything like that, like breeding clownfish or something like that, these are shown to that they are taken up by artemia, copepods. There's one study with Panamensis, apocyclops, which is commonly used in our industry, that's showing them in the gut, transferring it to the fish. And in that case, that actually it showed that the fish that ate them had a lower incidence of disease.
Nice.
And some other critters, little, microfeeds, rotifers was one of them. So, just, so you've got loading the live feed, but if you've ever worked in a hatchery or anything like that too, that the live feed themselves are filthy. So these actually help inhibit pathogens like Vibrio in the live food cultures.
Nice. Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay. So we haven't overly talked about the yellow snow, which is like coralline for food. I guess I know it's different bacteria, but like how does that different versus like the protobio?
Probio. Yeah. There is a product called Probio.
Yeah, sorry. That's why I
popped that's okay. PNS Probio is basically, well, -1. So yellow snow is a food, strictly, like a prepared food. So that is not a live product, though it is made with live bacteria. That product is meant to simulate a marine snowfall. So marine snow is kind of a common thing in the marine environment and very important food source. A lot of people just think it's detritus, but there's a lot more to it than that. The waste material, whatever it is not the important thing. That's just something for bacteria to grow on. And then that's really just the package for all the bacteria. And then that's what makes marine snow nutritious. Some of these bacteria and many others are commonly associated with marine snow. That's why we wanted to make the product. Do our best to simulate something like that. So anyway, that's kind of what that is. But it has to be refrigerated. That's one consideration.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So the main point of that one, I guess, nutritionally is, it kind of augments the whole diet of the reef rather than any particular organism. Nutritionally. For example, even these bacteria, our bacteria and others, they have different B vitamin requirements are very common. Sometimes that's what differentiates, helps, or one thing to differentiate one species from another that would otherwise behave almost entirely the same. It's just a B vitamin requirement. And yellow snow, you can think of it, if you don't use enough of it as a food, it also serves as a supplement for different trace elements, minerals, but particularly B vitamins. It contains the entire B vitamin complex, which is important in a lot of ways. Even zooxanthellae can't synthesize their own. They have other, there are other things. It's not like that. There are other things in the reef aquarium that synthesize it, but this is a sure way to make sure they're getting plenty of it. Yeah, including our bacteria have their own B. Every one of the three in probio has a different B vitamin requirement. So when you use these side by side as a companion product, they complement each other nutritionally, but in a broader sense, like ecologically.
So, okay, another question from Dan here. Does the bacteria proliferate in the tank? So if you're doing carbon dosing or something, is it going to feed? Is it going to grow this within your system?
I like to think that this bacteria doesn't really, it kind of removes the need for carbon dosing because they are so much better at exploiting a lot of some of the more recalcitrant organic wastes in an aquarium. particularly some of the stuff left over by dead algae like cellulose and polyphenols and stuff like that, that other bacteria can't degrade, by the way. So they use that as a food source. So you don't really have to add like Nopox or however you want to pronounce that, or vinegar, alcohol. You just add the bacteria, and then you don't have the consequences of adding those organics, like the drop in pH, maybe even a drop in dissolved oxygen. Because again, these guys, they're generally they're relying on an anaerobic metabolism.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they're breaking down all the waste that other stuff didn't break down. So we're talking yellowing compounds, stuff that tints the water. We're talking a lot of components of detritus that get left behind. Okay. So yeah, generally you don't have to carbon dose would be the answer, but I guess the more
I think it was just more curious if it would, proliferate.
Yeah.
And so on.
Right. So I guess I only answered half of Than's question there, but going beyond that, if there are sources of carbon for them to utilize, then and they're not outcompeted by other bacteria. They're not killed by ozone and the UV and so forth. They can survive. I've seen this in other tanks, including one of the reef builder systems.
So since you just mentioned it, it's a good question. If you are dosing it, should you be turning off UV or ozone or skimmers for a while when you dose it?
I mean, ozone that gets to everything. So if it's on, it's killing bacteria, especially bacteria. So you're just kind of out of luck there. If your system is insanely productive and you have some need to use ozone, maybe you should be thinking about other aspects of your husbandry to evaluate. But yeah, the ozone will kill everything. UV, you could turn it off for like an hour, and then these guys will have time to find a more suitable habitat in the substrate or even in a coral. And then they're safe from the UV. Obviously, they're not going to pass through the unit.
Okay, so it does live on, I guess, more surfaces, and it will go into under the sand and whatnot.
That's what it spends most of its time, actually. Okay. They bud off. They're called daughter cells. Those are the ones that are motile, and they're the ones that swim around, and then they eventually settle somewhere and develop into the mothers.
Okay, so the Yellowstone needs to be refrigerated. The other two do not. From what I know, they love the heat, so they'll be happy. Is there a certain, I guess, another question in the chat is, what's the shelf life? So how long can they live in that bottle?
We have an 8-month date on there from the date of bottling. So it depends on, if the bottle's handled properly, it should last at least 8 months. I know a lot of vendors, stores get mad at us because we're very conservative and cautious on the expiration. Especially overseas, they hate that, but I just want people to have the freshest stuff possible. Generally, they use it too fast and get mad that they think it's expensive. That it usually doesn't expire, but we had one customer, a very early customer. One of his bottles fell behind a shelf or something, and it was actually in the dark. Even is that storing them in the light is better. But it was in the dark for like a few months over expiration. And I was like, hey, you send it to me, I'll send you 2 new ones. And he's like, cool, you got it. So I took it and I used it to inoculate a new batch, and it grew like I just made it. So
those going strong.
So I don't, I don't even know what the limits really are because I've never had any around long enough to
so eight
crash.
Is a conservative guess, and is probably good a year out plus.
I'd say a year. That's about the longest I've yeah. And then after that, I don't know, but generally it doesn't sit around long. Just be careful when you handle the bottle, any kind of microbial product. Don't have like your finger all over the inside of the cap, or
just getting
don't let it. Yeah, just treat it like you really don't want stuff to get in there, including the airborne stuff.
So could having it exposed too long, or poking your finger in there, could you crash it from adding some kind of external bacteria? Like, is that kind of the risk from it?
Yeah, or not only that, it could be something that's not really good, that proliferates in the culture. And not only does it destroy your bottle of, probio, but it can have other problems.
Who knows
It's
what
like
else
sticking
you.
your yeah, it's like sticking your finger in your own food or something like that. There's nothing specially dangerous about
Did,
this product.
did you
It's
wash
just
your hands? Were
anything
you out in
that
the
can
garden? Like, what else you put in there?
there's anything you can contaminate that you could come into contact with later. You just want
Yeah.
to avoid that kind of thing.
Yep.
So particularly because this isn't refrigerated.
Okay. Mike Richardson, wondering if PNS could colonize the glass. He has a big long question, but that was his summary at the end.
Can it? Yes. If it has a carbon source, because on the glass, or if we're talking like up above the glass, above the sand line, yes, but it won't have any color because it won't have any pigments in an aerobic environment. Again, they don't photosynthesize, and it'll just be a heterotroph like any other bacteria. It'd be hard to identify unless you do aquabomics or something like that. It'd just be your normal kind of whitish or clearish white biofilm. Most likely, though, your aerobes that would typically live in that environment would easily outcompete it. You're going to see it deeper down. And if this is what you meant on the glass, like below the sand line, it is possible. You'd see that as like kind of a rusty red color.
Okay.
That obviously isn't cyano. It's like deeper down, like in an anaerobic area.
Yeah. Just what you see the edge along the sand. Okay, Gary, would deep cycle help with dinos? There's another one earlier about cyano as well. So would any of these bacteria help with dinos or cyanobacteria?
Based on anecdotal evidence, cyano, a strong maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Dinos, a weak maybe.
Fair enough.
Just from a lack of reports.
Yeah, that's fair. Gary, if you try it, let us know. You never know. Actually, that's another good question. Is there any other common issues that you've seen, either anecdotally or confirmed, but seen helped or benefited from dosing some of these bacterias?
You mean in terms of like controlling pests?
Yeah,
or?
just anything. Like, is there any like anecdotal, like this solves this type of things, or anecdotal benefits of certain things?
Yeah, definitely more growth of some of those typically hard to grow critters on live rock. That it's hard to, because you now I'm like putting a whole bunch of cases together, just things that people tell me about this or that, and they often don't know what the thing is on the rock, but my stuff on the rock, like this weird thing or whatever. And so a lot of those animals back in the day that, we weren't feeding appropriate foods, we just assumed that they couldn't be kept alive and they would die. But now I'm hearing that a lot of that stuff, admittedly, along with some pests, not all of those things, some of the like the pineapple sponges, from my own experience, those things I don't think they're bad, but some people don't like them. And that's one thing that you might see a lot of if you're dosing heavy. Yeah. But it will definitely, things that really,
they'll thrive on that new food source in the water.
Yeah. If they're like a picoplanktivore, for sure. If they like really tiny live foods.
Yep. So it's probably great for like NPSs and sponges and all types of filter feeders.
I get excited sometimes thinking about some of the awesome NPS. There was some other show recently we went off on a tangent talking about basket stars, like how cool it would be if it was just like cool. The simplest thing like that,
Yeah.
I've seen this personally through some experiments I've done. I've heard it from an aquarist. I've heard it from a coral farmer, Chris Meckley. A lot of the really hard to keep soft corals like Dendronepthia, carnation corals, seem to, I don't think anybody's had any of those long enough to say anything yet. I know there's some people out there keeping them that have had them in display tanks where they're not moving around and you lose provenance of stuff like that. But like John Gow here in Colorado, actually, if you're aware of who he is, they featured him on Reef Builders. He has a massive NPS system. I need to go talk to him. But anyway, he's had the Dendronepthias do pretty well on that. Chris Meckley's, wide variety of NPS corals, including Dendronepthia. It was really cool. It's like that's where I learned about these bacteria in the first place. Is Julian Sprung first wrote about them like 20 some years ago in the Reef Aquarium Volume 3, and he was speculating about whether or not these bacteria could be used to feed finicky soft corals like Dendronepthia, as he said. Nice. And that really piqued my interest because I've always been interested in those corals in particular.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So to the prior question about Cyanos and Dino. So Chris says he has not had Cyano or Dinos in his tank since he's been dosing it. So anecdotally, yes. And then Acro Killer said, I had success with PNSB beating dinos. There you go. I got some more
dinos, huh? Yeah, you know, I've heard some stuff about dinos, but it's like how many cases where they used it and it didn't, you know, are we getting, is there a bias in the reporting where we only hear about the successes?
Probably.
So, I mean, I love hearing when people are like, your product is, you know, but I try to be objective both ways. And you know, I keep an eye on that, but it's going to take a lot more. This is relatively new.
But if anyone's fighting it and they try it and it works, definitely let us know in the comments because I'm curious too.
Well, and there are some, I couldn't name them off on the spot here, but there are some cases where people detailed what they did using it with like, including it in like coral snow treatments, stuff like that.
Yep.
If you go on to Reef or somewhere like that and just do the right searches, you could probably dig up some threads where people are reporting success with this stuff.
Yep.
Or, you know, reporting apparent success with dinos.
Nope. Hey, any success is good success. I'll take it.
Yeah. Cyano, I'm pretty convinced. It's pretty, I mean, it makes sense ecologically too. They share very similar niches, cyanobacteria and PNSB.
Those basically outcompeting in a sense.
At least in certain zones. The only difference that they almost share all niches, like everything, food resources, space, you know, both phototrophic, they want to be somewhere near light. They're both nitrogen fixers. They're going to flourish in where there's low nitrogen. And they both are heterotrophs, so they're going to like organic matter and all that stuff. But the cyano tend to be more aerobic, and these guys tend to be more anaerobic. So you might see some demarcation there, where the cyano could be at the top of the sand bed. But I wonder if the PNS, and this is something I know, I'm just openly speculating, if they hit them with the antibiotics or something, even from underneath, because you do see like they wipe them out of the sand bed. I don't know, that could just be that they're, you know, scavenging a lot of the nutrients and carbon sources that were below the sand, and basically snatching that away before the cyano have access to it. I don't know, but I've seen that so many times, both fresh and saltwater, where it's inhibited or altogether just prevented the cyano from ever growing in situations where I know it would. Yeah. So,
well, if I ever get it again, I will try it because for science. ACI, not sure if protobio is the reason, but I'm growing a maize balls goni faster than anyone I've talked to. Also had this frag the longest out of the 12 previous frags. So far, so good. I like it.
Sweet.
Yeah, there was lots of comments too about just, you know, certain corals that were trickier, just seemed easier, less issues. So, you know, overall, it's just improving the health of the tank by the sounds of it, which is awesome.
Speciosa. There was a farmer for a long time until he stopped growing speciosa. He bought a lot of it by the 5-gallon cube, actually. Yeah. Pretty big time, well-known coral farmer. But yeah, that he swore by it, and it was really just for that one particular coral that he bought it.
It works.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. So to get the bigger cubes, I guess that's directly people have to contact you if they want those.
Yeah. And like I said, that's going to be like if
Than and Chris and bigger.
Yeah. Because I mean, they're cost effective, but they're not super cheap. I'll let you contact me first, but not to irritate you know, distributors and vendors and stuff, but yeah, you know, we do some contract manufacturing as well. So we've worked with some companies in the past supplying this to them to incorporate into other products. We've got some really interesting ones right now. I hesitate to bring them up since they're works in progress, but some of them are pretty exciting.
Yeah, nice. Well, you'll have to tell us in the future then on those.
stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, well, on that other note, is there any new products or any stuff on the horizon for you?
Well, it took a lot to get Deep Cycle out. I
Mhm.
should probably talk about that one. To me, that's really our creme de la creme product, and there's really nothing else like it. Truly, nothing else like it in the industry um, that's ever come out before, and it has kind of a cool backstory. So, you mentioned the word cycle in this product.
Yeah.
It's not a nitrifying bacteria. I don't want to confuse anybody with that. They're not nitrifiers. They're not
Mhm.
even aerobic. They do cycle nitrogen, but in a different way, and in a different place in the cycle. So they're nitrogen fixers. I've mentioned that a couple times before. It just means they take nitrogen gas and convert it to ammonia.
Mhm.
So that basically prevents you from bottoming out on nitrogen.
Okay.
They only perform nitrogen fixation when it's low, so they're not going to increase your nitrates when they're already like, over 20 or something. Or
So,
if they're even available, they'll preferentially take it out of their environment.
so what if you have super high nitrates? What's the effect going to be?
Denitrification.
Okay.
So then in that case, they actually no, for nitrogen fixation, they're actually doing that to get nitrogen to build their bodies.
Okay.
Denitrification is different. That's they get energy from that.
Mhm.
So they don't consume the nitrogen. It's converted into nitrogen gas and is exported from the system. But they get energy in that process.
So it can help if it's too high or too low. In a sense.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's all
they
right.
keep it at a very low level. So nitrogen fixing bacteria are far more important to us in our hobby than we realize because they're important on a coral reef. Coral reefs are nitrogen limited environments. That is what we should be trying to maintain in the tank to avoid algae issues and other things. Skewing the microbiome in the wrong direction, for example, all these other unforeseen consequences of having too much nitrate. Nitrate should be very close to zero if you're mimicking the natural environment.
Mine's high.
So
So I
corals
should try this product. Okay. Yeah.
corals get their nutrition from these bacteria. They live in close association with the zooxanthellae, and they leak some ammonia. Sometimes that's what's said to the zooxanthellae. I think a lot of it too, the corals are just eating it,
Mhm.
and then that DIN diazotrophically anyway, nitrogen. It's basically all the part of the nitrogen budget on a reef that comes from nitrogen fixing bacteria
Mhm.
can be like over 50% in some reefs. So it's pretty significant. Yeah. So basically, you're having that source of nitrogen being supplied to the coral directly,
Mhm.
and because of that, it's more efficient for the coral, less efficient for nuisance algae because they're out in the water column or in other places where they don't have access to it. So it's one of the reasons corals are able to so effectively compete with algae in the natural environment, actually. So
Oh,
another
that's cool.
fun factoid.
Yep.
But
So
yeah, that's the role. These guys bookend the nitrogen cycle,
Mhm.
right? So getting back to Deep Cycle, we do have nitrogen. I think so this has a PNSB, probably the best PNSB there is. I mentioned that they're usually lacking in fatty acids, and that's not so much the case with this one, rotavolum. I don't know if that's just because it's marine things living things tend to have like all these oils and fatty acids and stuff that terrestrial organisms don't. I'm not sure why, but rotavolum is rich in some of those fatty acids, so it makes it more nutritionally complete,
Mhm.
and it's insanely adaptable. This is one that would probably if you're looking for something that would live in your tank, this would be a better choice because not only is it more likely to survive in your tank, and I'm talking all the species in here, but they are natural reef microbes. In fact, I collected all of these bacteria from an actual coral reef.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
And even more cool, I collected them all together in one sample.
Yeah.
So they are they're a syntrophic group of organisms, meaning syntrophic means they feed on, they recycle each other's wastes among each other. So I have a culture now. The original culture I brought back from French Polynesia, it's like 2 years old now.
Yeah.
It's been on light and it's still viable. I'm still making cultures with it. I don't have to, but I've done that just to test it.
Huh. That's pretty cool.
Because they just have the input of light, but they just recycle the nutrients. So instead of competing with each other, they actually support each other's growth. So basically there's a host of organisms in here, but the star players are all phototrophic bacteria. You have your PNSB, your purple non-sulfur bacterium, the rotivolum that I talked about. Has some probiotic quality. That's what makes it green, by the way. It's a purple. It's the only, there's like a dozen species in the genus rotivolum, but this is the only one that's green. Huh. Yeah, I think it's rotivolum viridae, but I may even have this sent. There's a lab in India that I've been in contact with. I might send it there. It could be a new species. Who knows? But anyway, we've already identified, Aquabiomics has identified it down to rotivolum. And so we know that's what it is. It's so they play a role in the sulfur cycle. So we're bookending the nitrogen cycle. These guys play a role in the sulfur cycle, despite the fact that it's a purple non-sulfur bacterium, right? Has a limited ability to utilize sulfides. So the hydrogen sulfides that get in your deep sand bed and stuff, maybe even behind rocks that don't get good water flow, that's toxic. These guys can actually get rid of that.
That's cool.
So they use that as a source of energy.
Cleans your tank in a sense.
Yeah. So then the purple sulfur bacteria, obviously named because they have a better ability to do that. That would be merichromatium. That's another one in here. The color of the rotivolum really covers it up. But if you'll see, like, you'll always know it's in the bottle because at the bottom there are these there's like this purple, bright, like magenta purple sediment. It's actually a beautiful color. Yeah. That's merichromatium, and that is a purple sulfur bacterium that has some probiotic qualities as well for fish, and actually both rotivolum and merichromatium, both they've been studied. They're used as a feed, an aquaculture feed, and they appear to have some promise there. But these, the purple sulfur bacteria help get rid of sulfates, and that particular one's also a denitrifier. Nice. And then we have a green sulfur bacterium as Prostacochlorus. Nobody's going to remember these names, but that's okay. Yeah, we're warming up to all that. You're going to be experts in this someday, I promise. You can if you can remember like 30 coral names, or more, I think you can remember a few bacteria. So anyway, Prostacochlorus is important to corals because it's an actual symbiotic bacterium. It's green normally, hence its name, green sulfur bacteria. It also is able to utilize sulfides in its metabolism. So it just takes hydrogen sulfide and like all sulfur bacteria, just turns it into like elemental sulfur granules, which are harmless. So that's a good thing, obviously. And then it has some nutritional qualities of its own. But the really cool thing is it's an endolithic symbiont to corals. Endolithic means in the skeleton or in stone, I guess the literal translation, but basically it lives in the coral skeleton. It's insanely efficient at harvesting light. It can even use it can utilize infrared and all these weird wavelengths because it can sometimes live very deep into the coral tissue. Ours is not green. It took me to identify all these bacteria before. I thought that's why it ended up being green. It starts out purple in the process because merichromatium starts out and then the rotivolum dominates and it becomes green. But our green sulfur bacteria is actually kind of brownish. And those happen to be the ones that, according to studies, they're better coral endoliths. So they're actually able to live in corals with deeper tissues. So like an acanthophilia or something like that, where there's not as much light penetrating it. But anyway, more to the interest of an aquarium hobbyist, the reason they're probiotic is that they're nitrogen fixers. So they supply nitrogen to the coral in a very, very efficient way. I'm sure they themselves become a food source too, utilizing the coral's wastes. But in a nitrogen limited environment, like a typical coral reef, it's that nitrogen fixation that's critically important to them. So I don't know if anybody out there, tell me if you have, I've always meant to ask people this, anybody out there that does any fragging, especially like clean cuts with a bandsaw or something, you'll see like this green color. There's like a layer in corals I've seen just
I
in
have
wild.
seen that actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, and it's like a layer. It's not on the top. It's underneath. It's clearly not algae. It's inside the skeleton, and it's a distinct like layer. But yeah, if you ever see that, reach out to me. Send me a photo. In fact, if you've got one, because that'd be cool to hear about.
Okay.
I just haven't seen as much about this, and it's kind of been studied more recently. That
I have seen like little green streaks and different stuff within coral when I've bounced on in the past. So I don't know. I'm gonna pay more attention in the future.
Within the skeleton.
Yeah. I'm gonna pay more attention in the future now. I'm curious.
Yeah, could definitely be and the green is more, you're going to see that more in like a shallow water coral that receive, or it has a thin polyp anyway, where it's, more light hits the skeleton, and a more brownish layer is going to be some of the.
There you go.
And there's a differentiation even between the caps, the CAP, coral associated prostacochlorus. So anyway, that's the third big guy in here. So we have a purple non-sulfur, a purple sulfur, and a green sulfur. And they all three work together along with some other bacteria in here to promote each other and protect each other and recycle each other's waste products. And in so doing, they benefit all these other, organisms that may feed on them or their byproducts. And hence deep cycle.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so more for like a deep sand bed. But again, biomedia, and even you could use this even as a food. It's just more expensive than ProBio. That's the thing. ProBio is a little bit less expensive because that's more the tried and true, like mass produced.
So if you have both, is it better to dose them at the same time, or you'd stagger them? Do one day, do one a couple days later. Does it make a difference?
I would stagger.
Yeah.
But they're completely different. I don't know why I want to do this, but just to make the point. So they are totally different. There's no one species that is in one that is in the other. PNS ProBio, again, that's more like your regular use. And again, just like food and stuff like that. These are the big three, as I mentioned, that players, PNSB in the aquaculture industry. This is a more ecologically diverse mix. It's a whole community of bacteria that support each other. These are the ones that these are actually from the wild. And a lot of these are already associated with healthy reefs. Now, one more interesting thing about deep cycle, though, where I got this in French Polynesia, there was some eutrophication of the water. So it was near like a highly populated area. And we did even ICP. We thoroughly tested the sites, 3 different sites we got these from. And even talked to some biologists there, and it's a combination of like the pineapple industry and tourism, stuff like that, and just poor water treatment. There's the water's a little bit polluted there. It's actually kind of comparable to an aquarium, aquarium water. So these are the bacteria that would really thrive under those conditions, which I actually kind of thought was cool. Disappointing because the reefs are a little bit degraded. I wanted to see more coral, but I saw a little too much algae, I think. But yeah, these particular bacteria in this consortium thrives under those conditions because it utilizes those nutrients, those excess nutrients.
Yep. No, so true. I had laughed a minute ago. Alyssa, who knows 30? Yeah, I feel like I'm in chemistry class. Who knew 30 years later? She's like, I hated biology chemistry, but I'm loving this.
Good. Well, I hope I'm explaining it well. It's not something that I grasped. There are many, many, many nights sitting up till 4 a.m. reading stuff over and over again until I became this fluent in this stuff. So again, I honestly think that this is going to, just the whole microbial thing in general is going to be a much, much bigger thing as we discover more about the microbes and how they benefit our corals, but we'll get more sophisticated in our aquarium keeping. And
I think that's where a lot of stuff is going to be going in the next couple of years as we learn more and more about it and all the benefits.
well, just think of like the NPS stuff,
Yep.
or as I mentioned, the stuff on Live Rock that we,
Mhm.
you know, as we get more interested, people always think of Live Rock as being like an alternative, like somehow it's like these bottled bacteria versus Live Rock.
Mhm.
Two totally different things, complementary. In fact, sometimes having the high density of these bacteria that you can only get in a concentrated culture in a bottle like this of known beneficial bacteria, you can use that to feed your reef with your live, truly live rock, and maybe actually have some of those weird, cool organisms that live rock organisms actually survive.
Yeah.
So, right. So those sorts of future applications and weird animals, like, you know, we mentioned the basket stars and
Mhm.
Dendronepthia, and the list goes on and on. We always think at every stage of this hobby, like, because, you know, I've been marine now for 35 years at least. I've seen working in the industry, like in stores and stuff. I've seen so many changes.
Mhm.
And since I was a kid, and we always think we're like at the cusp of like, we nailed it. Like, this is it. Like, how could it get any better than this with these compact fluorescents, you know?
Yep.
And anyway, it's like, okay, then show me your tank full of basket stars and Dendronepthia,
Yep. Always
right?
learning.
Ornamental sponges. Think of the Caribbean stuff that we can't have. I mean, we can't even tackle ornamental sponges yet.
Yeah.
So
No, it's just gonna make it easier, and then more and more stuff thrive, the more successful everyone is. So it's a good direction. There was a question a while ago. I don't think I asked it, but they're asking about how long after dosing, if they did an aquabiomics test, would it take to like show up in the bacterial testing of the tank, and what would they actually be looking for? Probably just a lot of the names we mentioned earlier, but
if you took one immediately after, you probably
when it's extra fresh in there.
Yeah. And then it would depend on how successfully it colonized the aquarium, and then also like how you collected your sample. I think a lot of people are testing areas like their aerobic biofilter. They're doing a swab, like that portion of the test, the swab.
Mhm.
They're testing in areas that are going to favor other groups of bacteria
Yeah, that's a good point
that
too.
these necessarily wouldn't, they wouldn't be in that community.
Swab in the sand
However,
bed or somewhere else lower. Or, yeah.
yeah, and it's hard to swab. Like, say they're in the sand, right? Like,
Mhm.
how are you going to swab the just kind of
Take your sand away and swab the very bottom pane of glass. See what's
just kind of,
anaerobically hiding down there.
yeah, I don't know. It'd be a good question for Eli somewhere sometime.
Mhm.
If you really wanted to test for these, I have seen Alyssa actually. One time I saw one of her posts and she shared an aquabiomics report, and I saw to answer another part of that question. I saw on there the family that these belong to, Xanthobacteriaceae.
Mhm.
It's been changed a couple times. More recently, it was Brady Rhizobiaceae or whatever. I think you might see those on old tests if you're looking through some of your old tests.
Mhm.
But now you're going to see it as Xantho. But it's resolved all the way down to the level of species. So you would see it listed as Rhodopseudomonas palustris in a aquabiomics report. But yeah, Alyssa and I saw that family on there, and I was like, oh, that's right. Yeah, because I get a different, maybe not. I get a different version of the test than you ordinary people do. That's right. I think some of them are only to the results for the commoners are only down to the level of family at this time. But to my point, I saw that,
Mhm.
and it's not a family you normally see
Mhm.
in a tank. So I emailed, or I think I just in the post I just asked, hey, have you used ProBio like anytime recently or ever?
Mhm.
And Alyssa was like, I did, but it wasn't. It was a while ago,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, cool.
Huh. That's pretty cool.
Probably Rhodopseudomonas. So And like I said, Reef Builder's system. Jake was using it at the time that he passed away,
Mhm.
and I didn't have any feedback there then with them, anyone in the studio or whatever, for months. I think it was Reef Stock is in March, so he died in October, so November, December, January, February, like 5 months later. So 5 months later, to give you another example, unless it could have come from somewhere else. These they do occur naturally in the wild, but on the tests I took, there was Rhodopseudomonas palustris in there. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
I have a commoner folk microbiome test hanging out in my closet. One day, so I will do it. But I will dose some of the stuff for a couple months and then do one for fun and compare it to my really outdated one and see how it compares just for fun. But be
Well, that's
interested
the
to
cool
see.
thing, though. They're never really outdated because over time they just gain value,
Yeah.
because then you see trends
Yeah.
with your
I
tank.
did it probably at least 2 years ago now. So, I mean, who knows what's happened since then, but it'd still be interesting to see, how things compare long term, especially after I dose a bunch of different bacteria to the tank for a while and see what settles and what does its thing in the tank.
Hmm.
No.
Yeah, that's what I think they'll be useful for. Like, you can actually diagnose diseases.
Mhm.
You can find deficiencies, and I think we're going to stop looking at the core aquarium microbiome less. There's value in that, and I wouldn't want to take that away from Dr. Eli Meyer at
Mhm.
Aquabiomics has done amazing work. I don't know. I don't even know. Like, I'd be lost. Like, doing what I would be so hard for me to do what I do without his service.
Yep.
But right now they focus like on the aquarium microbiome, and I think in the future we're going to start looking more at what the natural coral reef microbiome looks like and try to mimic that.
Mhm. No, I agree. And then, I mean, at that point too, it's like, okay, does this, bottle of bacteria provide all the gaps that I'm missing, right? To, fine tune your stuff if stuff's out of whack, and which I think is a cool way. But awesome.
Well, then the discussion could be like, oh, do we want to replace some of these terrestrial bacteria
Mhm.
that we were using for this thing? Is the actual like marine counterpart a better choice?
Probably.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're artificial environments, so not necessarily, but
Fair
right.
point.
But yeah, it can go so many different directions, and
Hmm.
I think it's awesome.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. Very cool to learn more about it. I've been hearing tons about it the last little while, so I figure it was about time to lure you on and dig into it a bit deeper.
I
Awesome.
hope you do. Yeah, let me know how it goes, and we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ken. Thanks everyone for hanging out today. If there's any after comments, add it to the comments below and we'll get back to you and circle back to it maybe on a future live stream.
Hope so.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks so
Thank-
much.
Thanks again.